back to the Diamonds Basketball Podcast. Today we have a very special episode with a very special guest. You may know him as Richard Ivanowski on Twitter. This is going to be a pretty sweet episode. Amir, how you feeling about it?
I'm feeling great. We have the Richard Ivanowski on today. He is currently a writer for the King's Herald, and he works for the Sacramento Bee News. So Richard has a lot of insight and info on the draft today. We'll be getting his insight. We'll get some Kings info. We'll get some Celtics info. And you guys will get all the draft breakdown. So for those of you who haven't done your homework on the draft, me either. So that's why we have Richard on. No, I'm kidding. We did our research, but we needed to actually get Richard on because we would decide to get another expert. Caleb and I are experts, of course, but we need to get another expert that can really help us, and it'll give you guys a new voice. And since you guys are probably tired of hearing us every week, do you think they're tired of us by this point, Caleb?
Nah, they keep coming back. They want more.
They do want more. I mean, our average of viewers is going up. So
without further ado, let's get right into this.
Here's our interview with Richard Ivanowski on the draft special. For those of you who are excited for the NBA draft, make sure you listen to the whole thing because there's some really, really good info in here. Welcome back to the Dimers Podcast with myself and Caleb. Caleb, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited today. Today we have a special guest. Let's welcome currently writing for the King's Herald and Sac Bee News, Richard Ivanowski. Richard, how are you today?
I'm doing great, guys. It's a good day. There's been a lot of good, positive news coming out, including some Kings stuff. It's been nice.
Yes. For those of you who are Kings fans, we just got some news that the Kings have hired Mark Jones as their new head play-by-play commentator. Richard, how do you feel about that? I know recently a lot of people talk about Mark Jones as, one of the best commentators. So how do you feel about the Kings hiring him?
Yeah, I feel really good. I'm impressed by the Kings continuing to hire qualified people to do jobs. It just feels like that's the trend now. You get a GM that people say, wow, okay, that was a good hire. Other, competent franchises would have made that hire. Same thing with, Gentry. And then, we have that the coaching staff's being filled out entirely. The GM, the front office being filled out. And all the names you hear are just okay, well, these are real candidates. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when the Kings kind of were getting dunked on for just hiring anyone who, played for the Kings. You can have a job here despite qualifications.
The Kings actually just, like you said, they just hired a new assistant coach. What do you know about him, and how do you feel about that hire? Do you think that this is an upgrade for the Kings, or do you think that this is kind of trending in that same direction where it might be an upgrade on the assistant coach end, but you're still struggling as far as having that, a proper head coach that can lead you to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, it's both. I don't know too much. I'm actually blanking on his name right now. I have to look it up.
I believe it's Rex Kleiman.
Okay, yeah. And so all I know about him is he's been an assistant coach for 31 years in the NBA, including 3 years with the Kings back in 06, 07, 08, or 07, 08, 09, under Reggie Theus, and that he's been working with Gentry for a long time. So, I think the ties there make sense. I mean, it's a professional hire. I honestly couldn't tell you about his quality as a coach or an assistant coach, but it just does seem like, it's in that same direction. This is a competent hire.
Sure.
But like you said, I do have my concerns about Luke Walton. I don't know I really don't know what an assistant coach is going to do in terms of results. That's really hard for me to feel good about in terms of actual wins and losses.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to really tell how much an assistant coach can factor in and really affect. I'm looking forward to see what they're doing with the draft. And speaking of the draft, I wanted to get to a few players and ask you about them.
There's been a lot of talk about the Kings showing legitimate interest in Kyra Lewis Jr. Now, obviously, I'm a Celtics fan, so I don't know how the fit would be next to each other with him and Fox. But the aspect of how fast that backcourt would be together seems really intriguing to me. And I was wondering, from a writer standpoint, do you think that duo could work in the backcourt?
You know, it's tough because I think that Kira's a good prospect, and I think there's a lot of Kings fans who really like Kira, and it's for the same reasons that you're just describing. You know, Fox is, I don't know, maybe the fastest player in the NBA, you know, arguably, and Kira could be right in that mix as well. But I don't know, you know, from my perspective, and I wrote about this for the B actually last week. I wrote that I would be very comfortable passing on Kira. You know, like foot speed doesn't necessarily translate to pace. Like you can play a really high paced version of basketball without having the fastest players, you know, in the game. I mean, we think of the teams that are like, you know, really been super elite at it, like the 7 Second Suns or whatever. Yeah, they had like really athletic, fast guys, but you can have a really, really fast team that plays slow as hell. I mean, we just did, you know what I mean? And you can have a you know, a team that isn't like the best athletes, that your strategy is still playing fast and taking quick shots and moving in transition. So I get where you're coming from, and I get where a lot of people are coming from on that, but I don't think that it's like an open and shut case. And then my concern defensively is real, where you know I don't think Kira can guard anyone other than ones. I don't think he can guard twos. He definitely can't guard threes. So you put him and Fox defensively together. Yeah, I would just worry about that. And then there's, you know, the overlap with the Buddy Hield, Bogdanovich situation. How are you getting all these guards the ball? You know, and some of them could go or whatever. But, you know, generally my concern is that the defensive side of the ball, because Kira and Fox, I think, work together offensively. Kira's a very strong shooter. And I like Kira more as a secondary ball handler than a primary ball handler, in fact. But defensively, it just falls apart when you got two guys that can't really guard up.
I kind of want to get your take on what you think is going to happen with the Timberwolves. So there's been a lot of rumors about them wanting to get a win now player, and I think the most difficult part with the Timberwolves this draft is the fact that they don't have next year's pick. They are pretty much in a position where they have to be good next year. Otherwise, if they get a top 5 pick, that can potentially go to the Warriors. I believe it's top 3 protected, but even a 4th, 5th, 6th pick in a draft next year, that many people feel like it's going to be much better. That can be an issue for the Timberwolves, and I think that's why they're leaning towards a win now player or trading that pick. What do you think the Timberwolves will do, in your opinion? Do you see them taking a guy like an Anthony Edwards or a guy like a LaMelo Ball, or do you see them trying to get a more of a win now player to keep Karl Anthony Towns?
They're really tricky. You know, it's pretty clear that they're open to trading the pick. It makes sense to me that they're open to trading the pick. The best players, the best you know, prospects that I think will be available don't really make a ton of sense with their guys. You know, Cat doesn't work next to like James Wiseman. You know, LaMelo Ball. You know, I think he probably takes the ball out of D'Lo's hands a little too much than you'd want. Same could probably be said for Anthony Edwards. Although I ultimately think Edwards should be the pick there. I like him the best of anyone coming out of this draft, and you know, I think he can play off ball enough that works. He's going to have to bring his shot around a little bit. He's going to have to become a much better defender as well. But yeah, I mean, I would love to just see a trade there. I don't know. I don't know what the best player you could get for number one is in this particular draft this year. You would like to think that it's something, and this is a complete, you know, crazy dream, of course. There's no way the Suns would do it, but my fantasy for them would be that they trade number one and 1,000,000 picks for Devin Booker, and you know, figure that out.
Yeah, I think a lot of Minnesota Twitter has been saying that they want to get Devin Booker, but that's going to be real tough to get a guy like that, especially when Phoenix just went 9-0 to end the bubble.
You had mentioned that you view Anthony Edwards. You said you liked him the most out of anyone in this class. I actually like LaMelo Ball the most out of anyone in this class, but there is a lot of concern and question marks about his shooting moving forward and his defensive ability. Do you think that there's a perfect situation for LaMelo Ball to land in? And if so, what team do you think that would be?
Perfect situation. That's a good one. I mean, I guess it's just a team that has like nothing in place as far as guards. A team that like you can just let him come. You can rework the backcourt entirely around him. Maybe Detroit comes to mind. Just like they've got nothing. They've got like Luke Kennard and like an old Derrick Rose maybe, but you just push those guys to the side. Um, yeah, I think New York makes sense too in that same vein, and just like they got nothing at the guard spots, and it's a big city, and that would be a lot of fun. Just kind of him being in like the second biggest market, or arguably one of the top markets. I guess they're behind LA now, but that would be a lot of fun. I wonder. I have real doubts about LaMelo Ball. I'll just say that, like, I think his passing is going to be super special, and I totally understand why he's probably the consensus number one guy out of this draft class. But I have like real serious doubts about him. And I haven't said this hot take like publicly yet, but I think it's one that I'm selling myself on, and it's like a nuclear hot take, but I think I like Cole Anthony more than LaMelo Ball long term.
I can definitely see your point. I think a lot of people are worried about how LaMelo's shooting will translate to that next level, as well as I think people are looking at LaMelo as the guy who can really lead your team as far as a point guard. And like you mentioned, he is a really good passer. He has all the tools, but he's not as disciplined. And we saw it this past year. He was taking a lot of tough shots, kind of out of his range, and that's with watching a lot of these young players now is they kind of want to emulate what players like Steph are doing just to add that flashy part to the game. And not to say LaMelo doesn't have the flash, because he has the flash in his game, and I believe that's kind of what's got him to this level. But at the same time, that flash has led him to, having lapses in his game where he's not able to fully be that team player and affect his team in a positive winning manner. Speaking of another good player in this draft, Denny Avdia, he's also gotten interest from the Warriors recently. Caleb and I were talking about how the Warriors have been talking really highly about every single player. They were talking about James Wiseman and Anthony Edwards being beasts. They said Danny Avdia killed his workout. So I don't know if the Warriors are just trying to up the trade value for all these players, and especially the pick, which I'm guessing. But what do you think of Denny Avdia? A lot of people are excited for him. There's the false hype of him being similar to Luka, which I think that's just because of having those overseas players. But at the same time, he does have a lot of talent, and he has the potential to be a very good player. We've seen how natural he is on the court, and he just looks like he belongs out there. So what team do you really see him fitting in well with, and what do you see as his ceiling in the NBA?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm gonna sound like crazy. I'm gonna sound stupid because I have these hot takes on all these like universally loved prospects, but I really don't like Denny Avdia. Not as a top 5 pick. I think it's totally fine in this weaker draft. Take him 6, 7, 8, whatever. You're gonna get a solid player. You're gonna get a solid NBA player. You're gonna get a guy who's 90% likelihood he's gonna be a starter in this league. He's really sound fundamentals. The shooting numbers have been trash, but you see the form, you see the discipline, and he's going to figure it out to a degree at least. I don't know that he's going to be like an amazing shooter or anything, but he'll figure it out. You got a good defender, a guy that's like, this is the thing about him that I don't like, is that everything, it's like slightly above average, but there's nothing special about his game. Like I would still much prefer a guy like LaMelo, who at least has something where you can look at it and be like, well, he's got a chance to be the best player in the league at this thing. Denny's got nothing even remotely close to that. I think he's super safe. Like that same concept of like, he's just got a super high floor. You get a professional basketball player, plug him into your lineup. Maybe he's your 5th best starter, 4th best starter, best case scenario. But I don't know. I just don't really like him that much in general. In terms of what a draft is and what the lottery is and what a high part of a lottery should be, is going for star talent. Yeah, I have my doubts. And as far as where he would fit, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I guess he fits anywhere. Um, but again, it's like he fits in that way. That's like, yeah, he'll help every team. I don't think he's going to revolutionize any team. There's no team that's like, oh, okay, you add Denny Avila and you got a contender.
There is a lot of concerns with him because, like, he does have the high floor, but what else can he really grow on and develop and take to that next level? But I want to move on to the Celtics. We have the 14th pick, and there's been talks about trading all 3 first-round picks to move up because a lot of fans want Onyeka Okongwu. I think that's how you say his name. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm more sold, and I'm a lot higher on this prospect than admittedly most people are. I really like Jalen Smith because of the shooting touch he has. And I know that Onyeka's thing is he can guard in space, but Jalen at Maryland in his second year really showed signs that he could develop into a decent guarder in space. I'm not saying he's going to shut anyone down, but if you're the Celtics, do you trade the 3 first-round picks to move up to get Onyeka? Because if you're moving up for him, I'm assuming you'd have to give up a player as well. Like teams aren't just going to want to move down in the draft all those spots just for 3 first. Or would you stay at 14 and try to take Jalen Smith there?
Yeah, I'm definitely on your side of that. Yeka he's a really interesting player as far as, a defensively modern guy. But there's no bank. You can't bank like his jumper. There's some projection there. You can't bank that. And with the way that the center position is, I mean, it's been devalued, consistently every year. You can just get a guy. I mean, like Celtics are doing pretty damn good with like, Ennis Cantor and Daniel Tice. Like I know Tice is all right. He's Daniel Nice sometimes, but it's just like you can put anybody really on that team at center and they'll be okay. Um, so yeah, I'm not going to trade like 3 first-round picks to get a center. I think you can take Jalen Smith at 14. Maybe you take what are they 26 and 30?
Yeah, they have the 26th and 30th.
I mean, yeah, you could probably you grab whatever you grab Tillman at 30 if you wanted to get a backup. Like say Smith isn't working out, throw a couple picks at that position. Trying to think of what other centers might be. I just wouldn't. You could maybe trade up 26 and 30 and try to get like Precious with, I don't know, pick 18 or something like that. That's the route I would go.
Yeah, I agree. Because trading up, like, yeah, I mean, Onyeka is good, but you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. And like you said, with the projection of the jump shot, like that's a big what if. You know what I mean?
Also, speaking of what ifs, also on the line of centers, a lot of people have been talking about James Wiseman, and there's been a lot of speculation about how he can be in the NBA. He has the 7'6" wingspan. He's 7'1". He was pretty much putting up 20 and 10 in college. He runs the floor really well. He has really good athleticism. However, at the same time, he's not really a good pick and roll player, and he's very heavy footed on defense, and he lacks strength. So as a big man, and especially in today's NBA, where we've seen these big men like Joel Embiid, like Nikola Jokic, or a little bit on the heavier side as far as strength, how do you see James Wiseman fitting in? I've had a lot of doubts about him personally, just because his offensive game, and I would say his game in general, reminds me a lot of Hassan Whiteside. I've seen some comparisons to DeAndre Jordan, but I just don't see the same athleticism that DeAndre had, and I think DeAndre was a little bit lighter on his feet. How do you think their team's feeling like, like Minnesota, like the Warriors, when they are put in this position and there are so many question marks along with Wiseman?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. You would certainly like to have a more sure thing, but that's just not how this draft has shaken out. Um, he was consensus top 3 guy going into the year, and then basically he didn't play, right? Like I think he played like 3 games
Yeah.
for Memphis, and to be fair to him, like he looked really good in those 3 games, in my opinion. There's some questionable like defensive awareness stuff, but he kind of just was as advertised in those 3 games. And then I think the panic has gone too far personally. Um, People have him dropped out of the lottery completely. People have him like late first round. It's crazy to me. You still in a draft like this where basically all the options are weak near the top. I don't see how he comes out of the top 5. He's in my top 5 still. I'd take the risk on him over Onyeka even. Just because if he does pan out, it's kind of like that LaMelo thing. Like there are things you can point to and be like, okay, well, he has genuinely the potential to be very, very special. His like standing reach, I forget what. I mean, it's like Rudy Gobert-esque standing reach. Definitely has to develop in terms of strength, like you mentioned. But he has a ceiling, and that ceiling is probably somewhere in the all defense, like NBA all defense, maybe, getting some votes for defensive player of the year if he really hits that ceiling. And yeah, it's tough because centers, like even special centers aren't super special. Even Gobert is getting played off the floor in terms of matchups and stuff. But in this draft class, I still would have him top 5.
I feel like because he missed those, I think because he only played 3 games, I think people are starting to overthink what he can be. Because, like you said, in those 3 games, he did look as advertised. And I think when you have this much time between a guy's last game and the draft, I think people just start making up scenarios in their heads and start to overthink things. But I want to move on to Sadiq Bey. He's one of my favorite players in this class. I think depending on the situation he goes to, I think he could be really good. Now, I'm not like all-star type player, but like a guy who can make an impact right away for a team. How do you feel about Sadiq Bey?
Yeah, I feel like exactly how you described. He's gonna be an impact guy. The star potential, I think, is probably 0. He's not an athlete, but he's a Villanova guy. He's a Jay Wright guy. What's the list of Jay Wright guys that have come out in the last few years? Just immediately help. DiVincenzo, Brunson. I know I'm blanking on a few
Josh
more, but
Hart?
yeah, there you go. So I mean, like I think of like the last 6 Villanova guys to be drafted, 5 of them like immediately. I think Spellman is the one you probably say didn't work out, but really, really good hit rate in terms of uh, NBA ready role players. He definitely is that. I think he's kind of like an Eric Pascal, right? He's that guy. He could be the Eric Pascal of this year. Obviously, he's going to be drafted higher, but where he gets into that rookie of the year conversation just because he's so ready. And then maybe by the end of the year, he falls out of it because, guys are growing faster around him. Your like top 5 picks or whatever are kind of figuring the league out. But yeah, I'd say not an all-star type of guy, so probably not someone that I would want in like Kings territory, like pick 12 or higher, but probably one of the best end of lottery / like early outside of lottery picks that you could find. I think I have him like 16 on my board.
Yeah, he's the guy I want the Celtics to go after if they don't decide to go big, because I think he can make an immediate impact right away.
Richard, I wanted to ask you, let's say you're Monty McNair right now. Let's say you have the GM position, and in this hypothetical, let's say the Kings have the number 1 pick. Who are you taking as that number 1 guy in this draft that has all these question marks? Who do you really think that would fit well with the Kings? And more importantly than fit, who do you think is the best player available that the Kings could draft?
Yeah, I think they're both the questions are the same question for me. I would just take the best player available, and it's really hard in this draft to figure out who that is. I'll just real quick. I'll run down the rest of my top 5. I've kind of talked about them before, but I have LaMelo in there. I have Wiseman in there. I have I told you guys Cole. I'm really high on Cole. I have him toward the end there, and Killian Hayes as well. But my number 1 guy is Anthony Edwards, and it's tough because I don't feel great about it. But at the end of the day, I still got to look at Ant and just think that he's got the tools and he has the skill upside. I mean, he is athletically, he's a freak. He's these athletic freaks, they don't come along that often. That's why you can't kind of look at like a Wiseman and just kind of like shoo him away and be like, you know what, no, like I don't buy it. Because if it comes around, if the skills come around, if his, if he becomes a positive shooter with a good shot selection, more importantly, the awareness to the shot IQ and a defensive IQ as well. Like if his IQ and his awareness comes around, you've got a guy who's just a bowling ball downhill attacker. He's so strong. He's so fast. He gets vertical so quickly. I just think he's got the potential to be an engine for a team with his scoring and athleticism. Now, if he's the number one guy on your team, probably not a good team, but I think he's got that potential, and I'm not sure anyone else in this draft could be a number one guy.
Did you happen to see Devin Vassell's jump shot? His like new one that was like I think 3 weeks ago that came out.
Yeah. And I've also seen like his coach come out and kind of say that that was like him shooting from extra distance, like after a long workout and this and that he hasn't changed his form. But it's definitely concerning.
Would you let it scare you away from taking him?
Not where the Kings are at. And I know I shouldn't just be talking about the Kings, but I at a certain point I had I was really high on Vassell. Like I had him like top 4. That's pushed him out of that for me, and that's total panic. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I also think that it made me reassess my sort of hot take on him. So I just feel really good about him now being in that 6, 7, 8, 9 range.
At the 12 position, so currently where the Kings are at, what do you think the Kings' best move would be? Do you think at this point they should keep their pick and go for a guy that has a potentially high ceiling? Or do you think that's more of well, there's not many guys with a high ceiling. Let's go for a guy who has a high floor and is able to fit in well with the current roster that we have? Or do you see them being better off just trading the pick overall and seeing what they can get?
Yeah, for a long time I was on that sort of let's get a role player here because I don't think you can get a good player, like whatever, a star player or anyone with a all-star upside at 12, and that's probably true. Um, and I was really high on like Sadiq Bey for that exact reason. Aaron Nesmith as well. Maybe guys that could just you feel good about them being NBA ready and having NBA skills, knocking down jumpers, and then being passable on defense, having nice length on defensive tools in terms of length and size and strength. But as time has gone on, I mean, the Kings really looked bad in the bubble. I don't know what like one role player is going to do for a team like that. It's just I don't think that the Kings might be the worst team in the Western Conference this year. And so who cares if you have an extra role player? You win a few extra games, maybe you finish 14th. I mean, and to be like optimistic, maybe you finish 10th. What good does that do? It does nothing for you. I don't care about finishing 10th. I want I'll take the big swing. I'll take Poku over those guys. He could turn out to be nothing, but I'll take the swing on something special for sure.
How do you feel about Poku? Do you think he can be? Do you think he could reach that next level whenever he does eventually come over? Because assuming he would probably be a draft and stash player, right?
Yeah, I would think so, or maybe depending on which team takes him, how they feel about their G League team and their G League
Mm-hmm.
staff, that sort of a thing. And you just want to get him minutes, so maybe you build a G League roster around making sure you're trying to develop your lottery pick. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel good about Poku. I think though that if you're kind of breaking it down, so say like Sadiq Bey, these numbers are all, I'm pulling this all out of my ass or whatever, but say Sadiq Bey had, I don't know, a 75% chance of being a solid NBA player, but a 0% chance of being an all-star. I'd take Poku's like, you know, 5-10% chance of being an all-star, even if like that sort of just solid player percentage is like basically significantly lower. Like even if it comes with like, 50% chance he's a total bust, unplayable, never makes it to the league, I still would take that swing on it on potentially having an all-star or a franchise-changing player for the Kings.
One of those players that I believe back then was more of a franchise-changing player was RJ Hampton. RJ Hampton has recently dropped a lot in mock drafts, and he still has a ton of weaknesses that he needs to work on. He's not a great defender, and he just needs to get a little bit stronger. And on top of that, he's still not the best of a passer. So, how do you see RJ fitting in the NBA? Do you see him having that high potential that he once had, or do you see him being that late lottery pick for a reason?
Yeah, he's really tough. The whole NBL tape thing, like I've not been sort of analyzing draft prospects for very long, and I really struggle when I watch NBL tape and try to figure out the translation there, like how good are these guys compared to the French league or the German league or in the Poku's in the second league in Greece. It's like I like trying to put all that together is really hard for me, especially compared to it's just so much safer to draft guys from the NCAA for me, and I'll be wrong about stuff, but there was some interesting games out there where I think his team played against the OKC Thunder, which was actually like really informative for me and trying to see something. And there were flashes there. Obviously, he's not going to look good against. I think Steven Adams like just destroyed him on a pick at one point, and that's going to happen. But I kind of just feel like it can't. The tape in New Zealand can't really hurt him for me. It's such a strange circumstance that I kind of just want to leave him as he was before. I know Sam Vecini has, just shot him up his board. I think he was like 20th for a long time around there, and then he just put him like top 7 out of nowhere. And he's got a good article on that, and it makes sense what he's doing and why he's buying in. I don't know that I can follow suit. I think I've got him kind of stuck in like the late teens as well. The upside is there. I think he's a good athlete. He needs to add a lot of strength, but one thing that like America like sports in America are all about strength, and like you will add strength. We see it with every guy that comes over from Europe as well, and it's across different sports too. I think this is a pretty big diversion, getting really off topic here, but I've been trying to do some coverage of soccer recently, and the big thing that I hear about, why America struggles with soccer is that they're obsessed with strength training and they're obsessed with athleticism, where other countries that are far better at it's ball skills. You take 2 hours a day out of strength training and put it right on ball skills and that sort of stuff. And you it's a very different style of play in all these different sports. And I think RJ could come to America, get in an NBA strength training system and absolutely put on, 15 pounds of muscle. So I see the flashes. I'm not gonna take him in the lottery, I don't think, but I see the flashes.
There's one more draft question I have. This is a player that a lot of people view as a consensus top 5 pick. Sometimes you'll see him drop a little bit out. But how do you feel about Obi Toppin? Not necessarily where he could land, but he's going to be 22, and a lot of people view that as the age of like the cutoff for like where it's not a safe bet. And again, this is a weaker draft, so you could get away with taking him. But how do you feel about Obi Toppin, the prospect?
Yeah, Spencer Pearlman is one of the best scouts out there right now, and he hates Obi Toppin. He hates his defense in particular. He sees stuff that I could never see in terms of like hip flexibility and all this advanced scouting stuff that I just can't grasp, But I tend to agree with him to a degree. I could totally see a situation where Obi is just not an NBA defender, and that's very worrisome when you think about the teams that are actually contending. You need guys that can play and stay on the court in the final few minutes and not get attacked and not get just give up easy buckets. It's concerning, but I do think he's probably the best player in this draft right now. Like if we're talking about how they are today in their current form, he's probably the best NBA basketball player. I think his shot is real. I think his athleticism is real. I think his scoring is going to be real, and the role of a stretch four is very valuable. It's far more valuable than a defensive five who we see. You can just sign a guy. You just sign Alex Len. You can just sign whoever, come in and kind of defend the rim and finish pick and rolls or what have you. So it's tough. He's in that 7, 8, 9 range for me as well. I'd probably tend to go with creators over him, like Halliburton, for example. And I could even see the argument for Hampton for that exact reason, just someone who could be a little more creative and that skill being more valuable in the long run. But there's a lot of teams that could use a stretch four. Like Dallas Bertans is going to get paid for doing nothing but shooting it and being able to, being 6'9" and shooting it. So I see the value. I'm not crazy high on him, but I see the value.
Wanted to ask your take on what you think the sleeper of this draft is. As someone that covers the draft yourself and that really deeps dive into different types of players, how they would fit in the NBA and how they would fit with each team. We've seen a lot of sleeper players, for example, Draymond Green. We've seen Rudy Gobert, Giannis Antetokounmpo. These players that go late in the draft and that have this ridiculously high potential. So who do you see that player being? Do you see a player out there that a lot of people are sleeping on that they're not really paying attention to? Who is that guy for you?
So I'll go way down my board, like way down into like the middle second round for a sleeper, and it's gonna be tough because like going back to like a likelihood thing, there's like a 90% chance these guys aren't NBA players or something like that. And I could look really stupid for thinking that they have the upside, but I do think that's what upside is. Like it's just one side, I mean, the downside is really, really real. Like the downside is like really highly probable. But I think there's two guys that are just garbage on defense. Like they've got garbage defensive instincts, garbage defensive fundamentals. And if you could teach that to them and they become passable defenders and passable in their ancillary skills, yeah, I think Jamias Ramsey has upside of just scoring the ball. And I think the other guy, the real deep sleeper to me is Jay Scrubb, out of community college. And it's crazy to say that a community college guy has sleeper potential. It's completely insane. But he does. I mean, like go into the second round, no one in the second round has like scoring potential, on ball, game-changing potential other than Jay Scrubb, in my opinion. And now, like 90% chance he sucks. Like 90% chance like he doesn't have the fundamentals to play NBA basketball. But Scrubb is kind of an interesting case because he could have gone into Louisville. He could have the D1 offer Louisville. I think if he was playing at Louisville, we feel a lot better about him as a prospect. And maybe he goes at the end of the first or something like that. So to find first round talent in the second round would be a big deal, and I would look at those guys.
I wanted to ask you because Caleb has been harassing me and he's been harassing Harry Giles on Twitter. I don't know if you follow him or see him, but I'm huge on Harry. I know yourself, you're a big Harry Giles fan. You even had Harry Giles come to your wedding. So I don't think anyone can really say they have the connection they do with Harry as a fan like you have. Caleb has been really big on the Celtics getting Harry Giles for the past 2 seasons. Every time he talks about it, I get really frustrated because I'm like, man, you guys got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. You know how it is as a Kings fan. We value any young, good player that we have, especially given Harry Giles, his situation, what's led him to this point. us as Kings fans were very close to him as far as just being connected and really appreciating his style and his love for the game. So, what do you think about his fit in Boston? Do you think that Boston has any real shot at getting him?
So just to clarify, he didn't come to my wedding. My wedding was in a different country, so he didn't actually. He was going to if I had it in Sacramento. That's what I've been told at least. That was like the king. So I did the tweet. Got a bunch of retweets. I wore a Harry Giles jersey at my wedding. Caleb kindly pointed out to me that like that story about me and Harry is on the back of his card, his basketball card last year, and so I had to grab the 1 of 1 of that as a memento, and he's been really really cool. We've chatted and stuff. I've met him a few times. I mean, he introduced me to his mom and stuff. So he's a really cool guy, really great human being. Obviously, that, Amir. Like Sacramento, we love Harry Giles. It's universal. It's crazy how the fans, like, they go crazy for Harry Giles more than, really. I mean, it's more than Marvin Bagley. I hate to say it, but like, Bagley is like our, whatever, the better player, quote unquote, number 2 pick, that sort of stuff. Fans still prefer Harry Giles. Anyway, to get to the point, I think he's going to leave Sacramento because, Vlade messed that up. Vlade declined his option. I don't understand how he could stay. I mean, he might. It's a weird situation right now with the COVID and everything. Maybe you don't want to really leave. You don't want to move your whole life during this pandemic. Maybe because of the cap, there isn't as many dollars out there for various free agents. So maybe they lucked out there. Maybe they do keep Harry for 1 more year. It's possible, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think he's gone. As far as Boston, it's interesting. I'd like him to go to a team that's a contender. I'd like to see him succeed. I believe in Boston as a franchise. I believe in their ability, Stevens, to get a lot out of him, to coach him up into what he could and should be. But I don't know that I see the fit amazingly on the court, just because they don't really need necessarily a passing big man as much as like a defensive big man. I almost think you're better off with like these big bruiser types kind of in that spot. One place that I do see him going to potentially as far as fit, I think he'd be a great fit in Atlanta. And that's a great city. And I know he spends time out there as well. And I love Atlanta. Everyone loves Atlanta. I'd love to see him go to a great place like that. Up and coming as a team as well. Could really fit in nicely there.
Yeah, I could see that fit with Trae Young in Atlanta. I think he would be a very good fit there. Like you said, in Boston, they're looking for more of a defensive big, and I don't really see him fitting as well, like you said there. But hopefully he doesn't leave. I mean, you met his mom now, so maybe you can, maybe you got a good connection with him where you can keep him here.
Yeah, maybe if he I don't know if he does officially leave, I'll try to see if I can talk to him. They don't, teams don't like you talking to their players without their permission, but free agents, it's a different story.
As a Celtics fan, I watch a couple Kings games a year, probably like 15, because Amir is my friend and he's a Kings fan, so I like to be somewhat in the know of what's going on. One of my players I do really like there for the Kings is Bogey. What do you think they do with him this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep him. You don't have to keep him, but you got to do something with him. You can't just let talent walk away for nothing. That the Kings can't do that. They have such a crazy talent deficit as it is. You can't let a good player walk out. You can trade him. I think the Bucks sign and trade rumors have been really pervasive, and it makes a lot of sense to me. The Bucks, they signed and traded Malcolm Brogdon, and they messed that up, man. They should not have signed and traded Malcolm Brogdon. They should have kept Malcolm Brogdon, and I think they could have ended up in the finals if they had. And now, kind of, if this is their chance to reverse that, they send out Brogdon. for a first round pick, late first round pick. If they could send out a first round pick now, get back a Brogdon type of player, I mean, a shooter / creator, passer, like combo guard type. I think that they would like to undo that mistake. And we'll take pick 24 and DiVincenzo or whatever, something like that. A couple swings at good young players. I think that would be a good situation for the Kings.
Speaking on Bogey, he's also very close with Buddy. And as someone who has had a lot of issues recently with the coaching staff and specifically Luke Walton, what do you kind of see the Kings doing with Buddy going forward? Because we've seen the situation with Buddy where he's had problems with Dave Yeager, and now it's the same thing with Luke Walton. This is a little bit different because Buddy, in his opinion, doesn't feel like he's being used to the best of his ability, which many Kings fans can understand that. At the same time, however, a lot of us know that he signed that contract. He kind of knew what he was signing up for, and he committed a long-term deal to the Kings. At the end of the day, if you're unhappy, I get that. But he's still with the Kings, and to me, it seems like Buddy just wants out. We've seen him liking Philadelphia posts. We've seen him favoriting tweets about Indiana. With Buddy, what do you think is the best scenario? With him not answering Luke Walton's phone calls and Monty McNair trying to patch that situation, being a new GM, how do you see Monty McNair going forward with Buddy? Do you see him trying to, reconcile things and be like, well, no, you got to figure this out. We're not just going to trade you for nothing and give up a valuable asset? Or do you see him saying, you know what, we don't want to deal with this headache during the season. Let's get rid of him. Let's trade him. And if you do think they trade him, what do you think is the best option that the Kings can get for him?
Yeah, it's tough because I mean, Buddy is basically just like sunning the Kings, like on the rate. Like he's like, I need this money. It's like, okay, buddy, here, take this money. Okay, I want to be traded. Okay, we'll just trade you then. He's getting anything that he wants from this organization, and it's tough because as on the Kings side of things, it's hard to really argue with that. Like they need to kind of they're like they just said, like they're so desperate for talent, they kind of just need to concede in a lot of places and just give him what he wants, in the hopes that they can keep him. But you do that for players that are going to say the right things. Like De'Aaron Fox is an incredibly smart player, incredibly smart human being, and he's saying everything right. Personally, it's my opinion, he probably wouldn't like to play in Sacramento. That's my personal opinion. He's never said anything like that because he's really smart. And I mean, we'll build a team around you. We'll do whatever you need. We'll put the players that you need around you. We'll give you this super max. We'll give you all the money that we can possibly legally give you under the CBA. You have that. But I think it's a different story when you have an issue, right? So Buddy has the issue with every coach that we really had. He has issues with every role he's really been put in. And to his credit, I think that Luke Walton really, really, really badly misused him. So I'm not like angry at Buddy. I kind of get it. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, like I think, it's similar to the Bogey situation. You need value. You can't just let players go for nothing. Obviously, you need value. And if McNair feels like he can get better value at the trade deadline or next year, okay, I'll trust him to do that. There's some danger in the trade value going down. I mean, could he just refuse to play? Maybe. And then your trade value really goes down. So I don't know. I would take anything reasonable, kind of like the Bogey thing. Like if I can get a couple late first round picks, maybe one pick closer to the lottery, mid first round. If I'm not sure what the best teams, like the matches, like Philly is obviously a later first there. Like Boston, I've been throwing out this idea with Boston. Maybe Caleb, you can take a pulse on this kind of an idea, but like would Boston take Buddy and maybe I think the one that I threw out there at the B was it's a little bit crazy, I know, but like Buddy and Barnes for Hayward and a pick.
honestly, that isn't that bad because a big issue with the Celtics is like having that type of shooting would be massive for the roster, obviously, because it will help Tatum and Kemba get more space as well as Jalen even. Um, but how many more years left on Barnes' deal?
3 for Barnes, 4 for Buddy, and they're like right around 20 mil each.
Yeah. See, that's tempting because that shooting would be massive for the roster. Yeah, you have to take on a contract, but Barnes isn't like a locker room issue. So,
Well,
that's
my argument there is that so Hayward's nice, but he's never available. Like
mhm.
he's fallen apart, and then I don't know where you're I don't know where you're at on Hayward. A lot of Celtics fans I know are like he's kind of let's move on, let's find value for him and move on. If Barnes can come in and be like a low usage version of Hayward, like play that same role, not as well necessarily, but kind of fill that role. And then you got Buddy as well. You got what? You got Kemba, you got Smart, you got Buddy, you got Brown, you got Tatum, you got Barnes. That's your non-center rotation. I mean, and then you just plug in whatever centers you can through the MLE because I don't think you're going to have money to really sign free agents anyway.
Yeah, we're going to be out of money. Like even like a lot of Celtics fans are like saying that they hope Hayward even opts out, but Hayward opting out really it does nothing for us because it's not like we get that $34 million to spend. That's gone anyways. So I want him to opt in for sure. So like a sign and trade would be or like opt in and trade. That would be the ideal way if they wanted to move on from him. I'm not completely out on Hayward personally as a fan. Like he's okay, but like you said, he's rarely available when we need him. And at the end of the day, the best ability is availability. And if he can't bring that, you need to move on and try to get something that can make an impact.
I'll just point out, Buddy like never misses a game. Barnes never misses a game. Those guys together, like they're averaging like 80 games
Mm-hmm.
plus per season.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Richard, why would you take that trade if you were the Kings?
So I want the pick back. First of all, I would ask for 14 in that scenario. I'd ask for 14 and Hayward, and I don't even want Hayward. That's the money matching at that point. Maybe you're able to move him at the deadline for another, late first or something to a team that thinks, add one scorer, and we can get there, make the playoffs, whatever. So it's in that I think you get off that much money. The funny thing is, like, the Kings may not even want cap space because they're just so putrid at selling at signing free agents, right? Like, who's the best free agent we've signed? Like here, Amir, like,
For a
like
reason, maybe?
yeah, it's trash. Every single time that the Kings have cap space, they just blow their own foot off. Dwayne Dedman, my God.
George Hill, Zebo. I mean, it's like you said, it's never ending. The Kings have had trouble really getting free agents. And even when they do get respected free agents, they don't end up working out here. Like you mentioned, Dwayne Dedman. Dwayne Dedman was highly regarded around the league as a very talented center that can really hold it down on the defensive end. But he wasn't locked in when he was with the Kings. He just looked completely checked out. And I think that's what happens when a lot of players do come from the Kings. They don't really come in fully expecting, okay, I'm 2 feet in the door. I'm expecting to get to the playoffs. I'm expecting to be a contender. I think they're just really just there for the money at that point. And I get what you're saying. At that point, you might as well get a guy like Gordon Hayward instead of splitting that 30-something million and putting it in a bunch of different players that aren't going to work out. And to me, this is why it didn't make sense of not firing Vlade or especially not firing Luke. When you're so concerned about the few millions of dollars, we talked about it. We saw it on Twitter. For example, Corey Joseph. Corey Joseph probably makes more than Vlade Divac and Luke make combined in a year. And you get rid of a guy like Corey Joseph, you can replace your coach. Or if you don't sign a high-level free agent, you don't sign a guy like a Trevor Ariza where you're paying $20 million for 2 years, you can pay those coaches. You can pay a GM, and you can get those top-tier guys. So I completely agree. I think wasting money on free agents just hasn't worked out for the Kings. We're not built like that, and we don't have the ability to really get free agents that are willing to come here and at the same time willing to put the team before money.
Right. And so that's the only reason I would consider not doing this deal. because I think that what happens here if you make that deal, you get 14, you get Hayward. I think you move on from Hayward quickly. You've saved like 150 million off your books, right? By moving Buddy and Barnes off together. You get all this money, and so like if you're not going to use it well, then maybe you don't do the deal. But if you do think that there's, we got a new GM, it's a new era. Fox is good enough to attract somebody that wants to play with him, then that's why I take the deal, because you can actually start new, believe in Monty McNair, believe in a new era of Kings basketball, and think that you might eventually be able to sign a free agent. And ultimately, like, what's Buddy and Barnes really going to do? They're going to, win us a few more games. They're going to keep us like 10th in the West. So if I can recoup any value from that, I probably do it.
Speaking of Fox, I wanted to ask you, there's been a lot of rumors lately, especially from Heat fans, I would say, of Fox going to Miami. I don't see any really base to that or any ground to it. But like you mentioned, I do see De'Aaron in a situation where we don't really know if he's fully content with being here. I think he's happy with the fact that this is his team. He came to California. I think those are a few things he really liked. And I remember pre-draft, he was kind of pushing for the Kings. He didn't want to go to Phoenix. And I think he wanted to obviously go to teams like Philly or Boston, but they weren't even considering him, considering the fact that Philly at the time had Ben Simmons. What do you think the Kings should do with Fox going forward? Do you see Fox being that superstar-like player, or do you see his potential just being limited to the fact of, yes, he can be an all-star type player, he can be a Mike Conley type player, but maybe he's just not that superstar that can get you to that championship? Do you see Fox as being that championship style player? And if not, do you see the Kings eventually moving on from him? Obviously not now, but maybe in a few years after he signs that max contract.
I don't see him as the best player on a championship team. I don't think he's on that level. I'm really high on him. I mean, I think that he could be, like considered like maybe a top 25 guy, like like that all-star level, like that, Mike Conley, that unfortunate like never made an all-star team, but still one of the 6-7 best point guards in the league, that type of thing. I don't know, maybe he can crack the top 5, maybe he can be an all-star, but I don't see him as like that super elite level player. Despite that, however, I mean, it's still the Kings. I think that there's a very positive thing going on with De'Aaron and the Kings, where we need him and he needs us, and it's everyone is gaining from this relationship. He can be our number one unquestioned guy. He sells all the jerseys, all the tickets for us. In an exchange, like he's going to get all the money that we possibly can give him. He's going to get, all the praise. He's going to get all the showcasing of his talent that he needs. I do think that at some point it probably makes sense for him and for us, but mostly for him to go to a place where he can win a championship. That probably is closer to the end of his second contract. Like, we see that a lot where, you take the max after your rookie deal, and then it's, in your final season or two is when you would try to make a move. And it's unfortunate that, hopefully the Kings could put something around him beforehand, but you certainly don't bank on it happening. I'm not seeing Fox as like a guy who's retiring a Sacramento King, though. It'd be great if he did.
I think Fox has that potential to be a top 5 point guard. But at the same time, I don't see Fox being an MVP type player, or maybe that guy that can lead you to that championship. I see him as maybe a second or third best player for fact on a championship level team. But I completely agree. I don't really see him getting to that level where the Kings can win a championship with him. Hopefully they do surround him with the right pieces. But like you said,
let me jump in real quick on the Fox thing, if you don't mind. I just want to ask you, because I've been like borderline crucified for bringing up the possibility. Is there an offer that you would take for Fox right now? What would that be?
I think the best thing to realize is that there's no player on the Kings that's untradeable. If you ask me realistic trades, it would have to do with a lot of first rounders. So I would probably give Fox at least another year. But if you're talking about today, it would probably have to be a guy. I mean, and again, these are not realistic trades, but it'd have to be a guy like a John Morant, maybe with a first round pick, or man, that's really difficult. I think at the end of the day, if you're looking to trade Fox, it's going to be full rebuild. So I would get rid of Buddy, Bogey, see what you can get for Rashawn, see what you can get for Bagley. And I think at that point, I would try to go for multiple first rounders to maybe the Knicks. I mean, New York
Yeah.
has had a lot of trouble ever really getting to the playoffs, kind of like us. And even when they do get those young players, they don't really push themselves to that playoff level. So I think the only way I would trade him is to maybe the team like a New York or a Cleveland and get.
Cleveland. I was gonna say, like, would you do like Darius Garland, and like 3 unprotected? Like, I mean, 3 is probably too many to ask, but like, an unprotected first next year. Their first this year. What is it, like, pick 6 or what, 5? I don't know. Like, I don't know how much would it take, but like, if you got a good shot at Cade Cunningham in next year's draft, maybe,
Yeah.
and then like multiple. I don't know. I know it's lunacy, but just to
Yeah,
throw
I
it
think
out.
it's all hypothetical and it's a tough situation because it's like at this point, if you're a young team, who are you really giving up to get Fox? And that's a huge red flag that if the Kings are willing to trade De'Aaron, it's kind of like well, why are they trading a young talent for multiple first round picks in the future when he's already super young and he's super talented? That kind of raises a red flag for other teams like, well, what's going on there? What's happening? Why are the Kings wanting to trade him? So I agree. I think it'd have to be about 2 first round picks. I would probably avoid even taking this year's first round. I know that's tough because teams aren't going to be willing to give you 2 first rounders in consecutive years. But if you can get that, I think that's the only possible trade that the Kings could do. And speaking on that, I wanted to go finish off with Bagley. So again, Marvin has had a lot of heat lately just because of the injuries, not to his own fault, but he was a number 2 pick. And the biggest problem I had with Marvin is the fact that he did say that he wanted to be drafted to the Kings. He was the one that came out and said, I want to change the franchise. I want to be the franchise guy. Like, I want to be the guy that turns things around, which was one sign that I really liked about him. But the thing I don't like is not that he's backtracking, but that he's not really able to handle kind of the pressure that he put on himself. And that's not really including injuries. I get that. I completely understand the fact that he's had some freak injuries. He's had some bad luck. And to me, I think Marvin's ego is what is holding him back the most. To you, how do you feel about Marvin Bagley as a future on this team? Do you see him as a fit next to De'Aaron Fox, or do you see the Kings eventually trading him?
Yeah, it's really hard with Bagley. It's really hard. It's it's really hard to separate and like divorce him from the Luka stuff. It was the wrong pick. The wrong pick now was the wrong pick then. They absolutely should not have made that pick. They messed that up. I mean, that's why Vlade was fired, in my opinion. Specifically that pick. Made a lot of other errors too, but that was the one that sunk him. And it's really, really hard to watch Luka succeed while Bagley's on the team. But when you remove all that, yeah, I mean, Marvin's still a good young prospect. I think you could reasonably say he'd be like, you know, in like the 3 to 5 range in this draft as he is right now. Like who he was coming out of college, he'd be the number 1 pick in this draft still. But with the injuries and all that stuff, I mean, not to like duck the question, but would you rather have him or Wiseman?
Man, that's tough. I think I would still take Marvin just because of his pure talent and the fact that he's just a walking bucket on the court when he is able to be healthy. But there are some signs. I think the 2 biggest signs that really worry me about Marvin, and I don't know, you can follow up with this and tell me how you feel about it, but Marvin's tunnel vision as far as just like when he gets the ball, he just head down, hard dribble, left hand hook. And I think number 2 is more of his limitedness on both offense and defense. If you watch his offensive game, and I remember before the draft, I was doing draft research, and Marvin had like so few moves and that it was predictable. But the scary thing about him is those few predictable moves are very hard to guard. However, he hasn't really improved his arsenal, and he still has those few moves in the NBA till this day that he hasn't, even with Jaren Jackson. I don't know if you noticed, but he has this nice little spin move, a layup that he added during the bubble. And when you start adding more to your game, that can help you. But Marvin, we've seen him. He's limited on offensive end and the defensive end. On the defensive end, he gets a little too excited. He likes to be that shot blocker. And he can have moments where he can play defense well, but he has a lot of moments where he's getting beat and just trying to do too much. So that's difficult, but I would still probably take him over Wiseman as far as just overall talent. What about yourself?
Let me ask you, Caleb, like, because I've asked like this to a ton of people, but like Wiseman versus Bagley here.
Well, admittedly, I'm a really big Bagley guy. Man, that is tough. I'd probably go Bagley as well, but that's biased. Yeah, I'd probably go Bagley. I don't think I'd go Wiseman.
But it's close, right? Like, I mean, there's
definitely an argument to be made for both sides.
I don't know where I can't like really find a conclusive answer for myself, but that's kind of where, when you're asking like where I kind of see him right now, is I see him like that, like this very talented guy who's very young, has a lot of upside, but also has a lot of potential downside. Could just not work, like there's a real potential it just doesn't work out. I think the theory of him as a player was inherently flawed when you put it in the context of choosing him over the guys that were drafted around him, the Trays behind him, specifically behind him, the Trae Youngs, the Luka Doncic's, the Jaren Jackson Juniors, who have a modern game and have a role that makes sense. Because the best like case scenario for Bagley is this like this power forward essentially that doesn't really stretch the floor enough. I mean, like the best case scenario is like kind of like Julius Randle plus, like this super athlete four who's a bucket, but isn't super valuable defensively, isn't a great shooter or anything. Obviously, he can be better than Julius Randle, but it's like that type of player, which it just concerns me that the idea of Marvin Bagley doesn't make a ton of sense in the modern NBA because he can't really play the four on offense and he can't really play the five on defense. So I don't even know how you like the Dwayne Dedmon signing was an attempt to fit that, right, where he can just space on offense, just protect the rim on defense. Maybe a Jalen Smith is a good fit for Bagley, like that similar kind of archetype. But it's just a reach. So I'm still viewing him as a really high level prospect, but I mean, like all prospects, it could go really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Richard, for coming on today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on. If you can you make sure to tell Harry Giles to not leave because I don't want him to leave.
I'm absolutely with you. I'll hit Harry up and ask him to stay. I'll send him this episode. Please stay, Harry. We love you here, man.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard. We appreciate you for coming on today and taking your time of the day to come on. For those of you who want to know more about Richard, we'll have his Twitter link in the bio. Richard, would you like to give up your social media if that's possible?
Yeah, for sure. It's on Twitter at Ivanowski NBA. Thank you guys very much for having me on. I look forward to chatting more with you guys in the future.
Yes, we hope to have you on again. Thank you again, Richard. Have a nice day. That was a good one, Caleb.
Yeah, that one felt really good. You know what else felt really good?
What?
J Balvin meal from McDonald's. I know we just got done talking about the draft. And before the draft special, I went out to McDonald's and I said, you know what? I've been doing well on my weight loss goal. I deserve this one special moment. So I went up to that McDonald's window and I said, hey, J Balvin sent me. The lady says, excuse me? I said, J Balvin sent me. She goes, who? Then I was like, could I just get the J Balvin meal, please? And she goes, oh, yeah, for sure. Your total's $8.96. I was like, yes. And that Oreo McFlurry? Chef's kiss. Wonderful. Have you tried the J Balvin meal yet, Amir?
I have not. Can you please explain to the viewers what the J Balvin meal is? Because a lot of us are just still stuck on the Travis Scott meal.
The J Balvin meal is basically a Big Mac with no pickle, a medium fry, and instead of a drink, you get an Oreo McFlurry, and then you actually have to get a drink anyways because you're still gonna be thirsty. So basically, you basically just get a Big Mac meal and an Oreo McFlurry as a dessert. But it's pretty cool. It's just the inclusiveness of being able to say J Balvin sent me. And even though the waitress didn't understand it, she understood.
So pretty much what you're saying is the J Balvin meal is the food version of Paul Pierce. It's something that is overhyped, it's not very good, and people think it's pretty legendary, but once you actually try it and once you actually see it, it's kind of like, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not happy you used Paul Pierce to compare it to, but yeah. That's pretty much it. Yeah, it's very bland. It sounds cool. Once you look at the numbers on it, you're like, damn, it does all this? And then you go watch it and you're like, damn, that's all it does.
Yeah, and then you realize that's a meal that when you eat it, you don't want to poop your pants while eating it.
Oh, come on. Yeah, that's a dietary issue. All right, let's move on.
Thank you guys again for listening. We told you guys we're going to have special guests. This is our second straight guest we've had for you guys. Come on, can we hear you guys?
Nice. They're clapping. Just add in clapping sound.
Okay, I'll make sure to add in the clapping sounds in the background. But no, seriously, thank you guys for listening. We've had so much fun doing these podcasts. Caleb, how has these podcasts been for you? Have you been enjoying these recently?
They have been awesome. Especially the past two, really getting to go out of my comfort zone and interview a former NBA player and then an NBA writer. Like, moving on up in the world. My dad can't say I'm unemployed and worthless anymore. I mean, I'm interviewing actual guests.
Yeah, my dad can't make fun of me for not getting a guest that we were supposed to have on, but we'll talk about that in the future.
That's for our 50th episode. We'll eventually have him on and we'll ask him straight up why he did us like he did us. But that's beside the point. Thank you guys for checking out the episode. Let us know on Twitter what you think about it. And I think that's everything I have to say. I'm Caleb, so I'm checking out.
I'm Amir, and I'll see you guys next week, unless I do the podcast with Dario. Peace!
Peace. Why? Why bring it?